Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Elvis Presley trained with Ed Parker. Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And today, we return to the dojo. We're going to learn more about the relationship between Ed Parker and Elvis Presley, more about the things they talked about, that they taught each other, and things that Elvis gave to Ed Parker. Hi, Gunn. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And thank you so much for your email. And we're going to get started today by re-entering the dojo the same way that Elvis got his black belt, through the crucible of a warrior.
Feel a flame, hammer in hand, carved out his name. 16 and airborne boots in the dirt, jumping through walls, on baptized and hurt. Karate in Japan, fists like steel, champion of honor, deadly and real. Sensei, warriors, no room for doubt. You wear the G or you train and come back. Your eyes a crucible, baby, not a showbiz belt. You bleed, you break, you feel a warrior's spell. Elvis hit the mat, but he rolls with a roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. 30 throws, not dances, a fight. Bones to set, boards shattered on sight. Shoot-o, elbow, fingertip flame. Every strike a prayer, every KO name. 6 weeks of fire, no cameras, no fame. Just sweat and bruises, no more play tape. Saw came in, fist like a stone, said put him down, break ribs if it's known. It's a crucible, baby, not a velvet crown. You fall, you crawl, but you don't stay down. Elvis hit the mat, but he rose with a roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. All eyes watched the king that day. Would he crumble or would he stay? But Hank saw it, war in his eyes. Not a quitter, but a fighter who rise. From Hollywood lights to dojo dust, Elvis earned it, not on fame but trust. No stunt, no script, just grit and bruise. Black belt truth, not a headline roots. A crucible, baby, not a stage or set. You earn every inch, every beat of sweat. Elvis hit the mat, but he rolls with a roar. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior. They burned through the fire, broke through the fear. In the dojo, legends and kings stood clear. Crucible of a warrior, Elvis was here.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to hear echoes about how Elvis Presley trained with Ed Parker. And when we last left the dojo, we were looking at a book that Elvis had given to Ed, a book about spirituality that Elvis had read and that he had talked to in his way. He had discussed things with the book by writing notes in the book. And then he gifted this book to Ed Parker, along with the notes that were in it. let's take a look at some more notes that were in that book. And if you missed the last karate episode where we went over this book, I highly encourage you to travel back into the archive. You can reach it just below this video. There's a little black circle. It says Hillbilly Cat History, and it's got the outline of a gold cat. You click that button, you're going to go to the channel. And on the channel, it's going to give you choices. And one of the choices is live. And if you hit live, you can see all the lives I've ever done. They're all a 1-hour self-contained Elvis documentary. You could start anywhere in the archive and feel free to move through any way you like. But you'll learn something new out of every single episode. And in the last episode, we looked at this book, which is The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And Elvis had several books that this man wrote, but this was one of his favorites, and he gave it to a lot of people. And the notes that he wrote inside, he didn't just write these notes one time. He repeated these notes in multiple copies of the same book, and then would hand them out to friends. So there's more than one copy of The Prophet floating around in the world that has Elvis's notes that say these exact same things, or very, very similar. Because he wanted to share his spiritual knowledge with his friends. He had a hard time doing it. Mostly because his friends didn't really want to listen. Ed, however, Ed liked these kind of discussions. So Ed and Elvis were able to bond over these kind of esoteric thoughts, spiritual thoughts, sacred thoughts, philosophical discussions. Elvis couldn't get this from everybody. He got it from Larry Geller to some extent. But Ed was taking this knowledge, talking it over with Elvis, and then incorporating it back into the karate. It's a full circle. They would do things in karate and then relate them to their philosophical discussions. And on this page, Elvis has underlined, "The musician may sing to you of the rhythm which is in all space, but he cannot give you the ear which arrests the rhythm, nor the voice that echoes it. And he who is versed in the science of numbers can tell you of the regions of weight and measure, but he cannot conduct you thither." That is a very convoluted, to me, it's a very convoluted passage that doesn't really say anything. But Elvis translates it in his own words, and they actually make much more sense, at least to me. You guys let me know what you think. But here's what Elvis says. A singer can sing his songs, but they must have an ear to receive the song. In other words, Elvis is telling the book, or agreeing with the book, that the most important part of the performance, or at least one massively important part of your performance as an artist, as a singer, is the audience, the fans. If there's no audience, if there's no fans, if there's no one listening, the singing can still be beautiful, but now it has no purpose. So the musician can sing, but it's no good if you don't have this other piece. And the other piece is really the audience, the fans. And of course, we know Elvis loved his fans. So this passage probably meant something very personal to him. And the next passage that he has underlined is, "For the vision of one man lends not its wings to another. And even As each one of you stands alone in God's knowledge, so must each one of you be alone in his knowledge of God and in his understanding of the earth. This passage is telling you that only you, each person, each individual, they have to make their decisions about religion for themselves. They have to find their beliefs and their purposes in and of themselves, and they can't rely on others to tell them what it is. That others can guide them, but ultimately, you are alone in your knowledge of God and his understanding of the earth. I'm not sure that that exactly agrees with Christian scripture, but Elvis has underlined it. And Elvis has written, you have within yourself all possibilities to unlock all the answers that plague one's inner heart. God will give you the knowledge if you only seek it. So I will read Elvis's passage again. I think it's very powerful, has a lot of good wisdom in it. Elvis says, you have within yourself all possibilities to unlock all the answers that plague one's inner heart. God will give you the knowledge if only you seek it. Elvis is telling us that all the answers to your problems you already have within yourself. That God granted that to you at birth. That the issue is not you having the answers, it's recognizing the answers. And that God will unlock the answers which are already inside of you and help you to see them, help you to understand what they are, if you ask him. Which is the Christian tenet that if you ask Jesus into your heart, he will come. But that he can't be there unless you've asked him. God can't give you the knowledge unless you've gone to him and said that you need the knowledge. You've acknowledged that only he can help you. And Gunn's asking, it means the audience here is the reader of the book. I think probably that the man who wrote the book, the author, when he writes his portion, he probably is comparing himself to this musician, and he's singing, and the audience are those who are reading. So just like Elvis, if he writes and no one reads it, then it only accomplished half of the mission, which was to leave himself and to be sent out into the world. But it didn't make it to the people, the ones who need it. But when Elvis writes, a singer can sing his songs, but they must have an ear to receive the song, I believe he's talking directly about his own fans. That he sings songs, but he recognizes that they're no good if no one listens. And that his life, everything that he has in his life, is due to these people who listen to his songs. And Gunn's saying Elvis's words mainly. Yeah, I think he's referring to his own fans and his own. This is a reflection of his own life. He's living a life that is the product of those who heard him sing. And he's also telling us that he's had problems in his life, and he has gone to God, and God has revealed to him knowledge that he already had. Because he tells us that we can do it. So he's indicating that it's already happened for him, that he's done this before, and he will follow this as a way to find answers in the future. And so Gunn's asking, who is Elvis giving this message to when he writes it in the book? That's a good question. So initially, I believe when Elvis writes in his book, he is speaking directly to the text. So it's as if he's having a conversation with the author. Now, the author's not going to answer there, obviously. He's going to answer in future pages, in other passages, and Elvis may find his answers there. But I think what Elvis is doing here specifically is he's underlining, I see truth here, but this is the way that I would state truth that is restated here. And he's finding these pieces of truth throughout all of these books and showing that the truth, the light, it filters out through all beliefs. Doesn't matter who you say you believe in, that God's truth filters into everything. And that at least some portion of what you believe, some portion that what other people perceive as wisdom, some portion of that is built upon this truth that Elvis is finding in all of these books. Now, again, this is just my theory of what Elvis is doing, but it appears to me that he's speaking back to the book and that he's probably done this a few times with this particular passage. He's thought this out. Then he kind of codifies his thoughts into these forms. And then he repeats these thoughts into other copies of the same book. Then he hands the book to his friends. So the audience for the notes, I think at first it's an exercise for himself, so they're really for him. And then they become his thoughts in written form that he likes, that he thinks have wisdom and meaning for others, that he thinks others that he knows will be able to read and pull the meaning from, and he gives it to them, people that he loves. Now, not all those people read these books. Not all of them join this quest. Not all of them understand what Elvis is trying to communicate to them. And Elvis, he pushes it on them with the books, and he talks to them about it, but he's not overly pushy about it, right? He keeps bringing it up, and he keeps trying to attract people to go along with him on these talks. Ed does, but others don't. And so I think we could look at a bunch of these books that were given to various people. And why are we able to see these books? Because they're out on the open market. They've made it out to the auction circuit, which indicates that whoever had it felt like it wasn't worth keeping, or they needed the money more than they wanted the book and the notes from Elvis. Now, in this case, Ed had passed away. So when these people pass, when people who have received gifts from Elvis, then the gifts become, like a monetary commodity at that point. Because in most cases, the people who inherit the gifts, they don't have the love for Elvis in most cases that, say, Ed had. Ed hung on to his stuff to the very end because he wanted most of it. Now, he let go of some things. They all let go of some things, which was fine. Elvis had given them gifts to help them through life, and they used them. And Ed used them to help his business and his family. And others used them, but many sold them before, lots and lots of pieces, like almost every piece they owned from Elvis. So it's just kind of sad because here he's really giving you something very, very personal. And on this page, Elvis has underlined, "These things he said in words, but much in his heart remained unsaid. For he himself could not speak his deepest secret." These things he said in words, but much in his heart remained unsaid. for he himself could not speak his deeper secret. That sounds very personal to me about Elvis, that Elvis saw himself reflected in these words, that he's writing things in words in these books, but much of his heart remains unsaid. He can't speak what's deepest in his heart. And that's true in most personal, interpersonal relationships as well. So like these friends that Elvis has, even Ed, he can't tell him everything. The women that Elvis has love affairs with, he loves them, but he can't tell them everything. He has deeper secrets. Things about himself that he is afraid to reveal to others, just like we all have. Because he knows that most of these people see him as an image and not as a person. And Linda says that she would like to find a book he made notations in that she could afford. There's a book, Linda, that's titled, and of course I would forget the title at this very moment. I wish Carolyn, who loves Elvis, was here because she was just talking about the book. It was printed in the early 90s, and it reprints pages from several different books that Elvis owned and made notations in. So you don't get the whole book, you just get copies, photocopies of the pages that Elvis wrote the notes on, but you can read his notes. That book is still available out there. I don't think it's in print anymore, but you can still get copies of it, and I'm going to guess they're going to run around $30, but I don't know for sure. I've got a copy of it, but I cannot remember what the name of it is at this moment, but that is there. Those resources are there. And if you look around on the internet, you can find copies of the pages. Now, this particular book, I don't know about this particular book, but there's another book I've just been discussing with another fan, and that book is from 1915, so it's definitely out of copyright. And I haven't looked yet, but I'm fairly certain I can find a digital copy of it. And it won't have Elvis's notes written in it, but I've thought that maybe we could read through it together, like a chapter at a time. Would you guys be interested in something like that? We would read through a book that Elvis gave to many people, and we would have some of his notes because I would have those from other copies. We wouldn't have all the notes that he wrote in the book, but we would read through. But it's like this. It's like this book here. So I'll just read from the top of this page down, and I'm not sure that these kind of books would maintain the interest of even an Elvis audience. But it's, am I a harp that the hand of the mighty may touch me, or a flute that his breath may pass through me? A seeker of silences am I, and what treasure have I found in silences that I may dispense with confidence? If this is my day of harvest, in what fields have I sowed the seed, and in what unremembered seasons? So you can see just from this short passage that these books are about deep metaphorical thought. So they don't have like plots, or I don't even find them to be particularly interesting. So it's fascinating that Elvis did. Elvis saw things in here, and you can tell because when he underlines, and when you read his underlined passages, and you think about it, you think, wow, that makes all kinds of sense that he underlined these passages. But the books themselves, I can understand why the others didn't want to listen to him read them. But Linda says that she would be interested in that, so maybe we'll do that. We'll do at least a few chapters one day. And you're also saying that you believe that he made notations in his Bibles. He sure did, Linda. And if you'd like to see an episode about those notations, at least some that were in the Bible that his Uncle Vester gave him in 1957 for Christmas, the same day that Gary Pepper gave Elvis a Bible for Christmas, was on Christmas Eve. You can see that. It's in an episode that I did on Those Elvis Girls YouTube channel. I go by a different name there. I'm Manly Stranger when I was doing the Elvis Girls. And then I started this channel later. But I did do an episode over there. It's got a bunch of Bibles in it. One of them is Vester's Bible, and I go through what Elvis wrote in that Bible. Now on this page, Elvis has underlined a few other things. And it says, "And all work is empty, save when there is love. And when you work with love, you bind yourself to yourself and to one another and to God." So here Elvis has underlined words about love. And we know that he has written, I think it was this book that we looked at in the last episode, where he said that if you don't have love, you're not alive. I don't remember the exact words, but they were something about only if you have love are you alive. And here he's saying, all work is empty, save when there is love. And when you work with love, you bind yourself to yourself and to one another and to God. Now here is Karate G. It's white. It's one that Elvis owned and wore. This Karate G was designed by Bill Ballou. Bill Ballou is the same man who designed Elvis's jumpsuits. And if you've been following Terry's channel, Elvis History, he recently put up a video about jumpsuits. And he talks about Bill Ballou for a moment. But that is the same guy who designed this particular outfit. Now you can see on this outfit that on the pants, it's also got those flared legs that you can tie together, which seems to be some kind of a fashion piece that Elvis really likes. Now, I'm not really sure why, but they do look really cool. And Susan Wakefield Lamont, who is a person who knew Ed Parker. She lived near Ed Parker. And she says, so many memories of Ed Parker telling us stories of Elvis and their amazing friendship. What an example you and Leilani were to us young adults. I was mesmerized at the karate demonstrations at every Christmas party at the Parker home. Wonderful memories. So Ed used to invite like his neighbors and stuff over to his house at Christmas. And he would put on karate demonstrations, and his wife would host, and they would have a wonderful party. And this lady remembers it. And that kind of tells you a little bit about the person that Ed Parker was. Now here is Ed Parker's beautiful family in 1960 and his lovely wife. And I'm not the only one who thinks that his wife is lovely. Elvis thought it too. And he gave Ed's wife a special gift. And this is an emerald ring with a very large emerald. It's set in 14 karat gold, and it's accented by diamonds, 26 grams total. And Elvis gave this to Ed Parker's lovely wife. And we can see it from a few more angles. And Linda says she'd be interested in seeing the Bible episode. Well, Linda, if you go out to any of my very early video episodes, which you can get to by going to the channel and clicking on video and then sorting by oldest first. Like in the first 10 or so, I give a link to that particular video. Guys, I'm having a massive amount of technical issues on this end that I don't think you guys can see, but give me a moment while I try to fix some of these. Just have to try to rearrange some stuff. I think that might fix it. Okay. Here's another look at the emerald ring. And Ed Parker says, in late 1960, Elvis Presley attended a karate demonstration that I was giving at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel in California. Elvis had attended, unbeknownst to me, until I was informed later. Elvis apparently liked what he saw, and we both immediately bonded and developed a lifelong friendship. I grew to love Elvis as a brother over the years. I began teaching Elvis on and off for the remainder of his life, eventually accompanying him on his tours to be there to protect him. Now, we've heard other stories about the day that Elvis met Ed Parker, and the men that were with Ed said they noticed that Elvis was with a very beautiful woman who was very unhappy that he was leaving her behind in the hotel room. And she felt that instead of going to the karate demonstration, he should have stayed with her. But apparently Ed didn't see that. So Ed must have been very, very busy that day, because he didn't even notice that Elvis was attending. Yet all of the men that were with him, they noticed when Elvis came out of his room, his hotel room, in a bathrobe. On screen, we can see a Kenpo Karate Gold ID badge. Now, at some point, I think in the early 70s, Elvis found somebody that made these gold ID badge things. And he's got a whole bunch of these in different varieties. Like, at one point, if you were on tour with him, you would get a gold badge that looked similar to this and said you were a tour member. Now, there's at least some fakes out there of that, because I found a few that are sold by a guy named Earl Greenwood. And if you ever see Earl Greenwood, his name attached to anything with Elvis, that is false. And whatever it is that he's attached his name to is completely false. Earl Greenwood, there's a lady that does all the stuff with him who I think is Earl Greenwood. I don't think there is such a person as Earl Greenwood. He claims to be Elvis's cousin. So whenever you see stuff that has his name attached to it, just automatically understand that is a false, whatever it is. But in this case, this is a card that Dave Hebler had printed, surely at Elvis's instruction and with Elvis's money, to celebrate the fact that Elvis had achieved the rank of 8th degree black belt in Kenpo. So we've talked about the degrees of black belt a little bit, but the degree of black belt is different in each discipline. So when we talked about Kong Ree, Master Ree, granting Elvis a 7th degree black belt, that was in Kong Ree's style of karate. This is his 8th degree black belt, the card that signifies that, in International Kenpo Karate, also known as American Kenpo Karate, which was the type that Ed Parker was teaching. That was his style. And you can see there's a date on here, September 5th, 1974. Well, that date is just a few days before the date that Kong Ree gave Elvis his 7th degree black belt in his discipline. So that story that we heard several episodes ago, if you didn't hear that story, be sure you head back into the archive. It's there for you. But that story occurred on the 9th, 4 days later. So Elvis is working with multiple instructors at the same time, and he's gaining recognition under multiple paths of karate. This particular badge is also labeled somewhere on it that I cannot see. Might be the back or something. It's labeled 28 of 100. So Dave had 100 of these printed. And it's officially described as commissioned by Ed Parker and Dave Hebler. So maybe Elvis himself didn't pay for these cards. Maybe Ed paid for them. But I'm fairly certain they were produced by the same people who were producing Elvis's other gold cards that were similar. Don't know that for sure yet. And the story goes that Elvis received and carried one of these gold cards in his wallet every time he received a new ranking. And I don't know if that was only for international Kenpo karate. Maybe he had similar cards for other forms of karate. I haven't seen any examples of those yet. But Dave had 100 of these made, and then Elvis would give them out to friends and family. So Elvis kept one for himself, and then he would hand them out because he was very proud that he had reached this 8th degree black belt, and he shared that with those he felt that loved him. And he'd give them this little memento. But the reason that this one went onto the auction market, this particular card, this number 28 of 100, is that in less than a year, Elvis promoted from 8th to 9th degree black belt in Kenpo karate, and therefore this card was no longer up to date, and he wasn't handing it out anymore. And Dave, I believe, just had the rest of them. So this would makes it out onto the market. Because this card came directly from Dave Hebler. So we could draw from that only 27 of these cards were ever handed out. Although it could be that they didn't hand them out in numerical order. Seems likely they probably didn't. But might indicate only 27 ever made it out into the wild. And this 28 is the first one that didn't. And that would also indicate Dave had a whole bunch more of these. Now, I don't know if any of that's true. All I know for sure is what we can see on screen. And Ed Parker talks about what Elvis and he discussed. And we've talked a little bit about other things, but I think this one's really going to surprise you. Ed Parker says, each area of discussion would soon lead to other topics, such as who were the probable occupants of UFOs, unidentified flying objects. We both expressed belief that UFO sightings were genuine. It was not until I mentioned personally witnessing a flying saucer that Elvis revealed his experience in observing one. And Gunn is asking about the 9th degree black belt. Who gave him that? Well, that would be Ed Parker. So it's in the Kenpo karate style. But it's Ed who would have given him that. And Ree gave him 7. Now, what we didn't really get into yet is that Ree also gave him an 8. And he gave him an 8 like less than a month later. So there are some irregularities to how some of these black belts got given out. I think it's important that we understand the people that were awarding these belts and their relationship to Elvis and their time constraints with their relationship to Elvis. You know, Elvis only had so much time available. And I think that all played something into it. But we'll look at it all. We'll get there. But let's look again at this statement that Ed makes about UFOs. Now, in the 1960s, remember that Elvis met Ed in 1960. Their relationship grows over time. And they're probably having these discussions about UFOs sometime in the early 70s, perhaps late 60s. And UFOs at that moment in time were huge news. They were all over the papers. People were reporting sightings from everywhere, and all kinds of these theories started to pop up to explain these UFOs. Now, at the same moment, there was also a rise in all forms of, I can't remember the exact term for it, but science that is beyond science. So like the Loch Ness Monster, the Bigfoot, any of these legendary type things, UFOs, who built the pyramids, all of that became extremely popular to think about in the late 60s and in the 70s. But there was a massive amount of UFO sightings during that period. So it was a natural discussion topic. In fact, if you're into UFOs now, or if you liked the series The X-Files when it was on, or if you liked the movie series The Men in Black, all of that started in the 1960s. but only people who were really into it knew about that stuff in the 1970s. I personally, as a child, had a friend who was another child. We were probably about 10 or 12 years old, and he just went for that stuff like head over heels. And he's the very first person that ever told me about the Men in Black. And this was like 1982, long before the movies or anything came out. And he knew everything about them, every rumor that had ever been published. And that might be because at our schools, in the libraries of the town that I grew up in anyway, and I kind of assumed it was probably similar to a lot of the United States, they had a lot of books about UFOs and Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, all that stuff. They had massive numbers of those books. Also about the Universal monsters from the Universal movies. It's like those two things were very popular with boys of 12 and under. So the libraries in the school were filled with that stuff. But this is two grown men, and they're talking about UFOs. But Gunn is asking, why give Elvis 2 grade 8s? Wasn't Ree's valid? So yes, but Ree's is only valid in his form of karate, which is not Kenpo karate. So karate has many different disciplines, the same way that music has several different varieties. So rock and roll today has rock and roll, alternative rock, grunge rock, heavy metal, classic rock, there's punk rock. There's 50 different names for 50 different styles of just rock music. So it's kind of like Ed was teaching heavy metal and Ree was teaching classical rock and roll. And so they're giving out proficiencies in two different forms of the same art. And that's why you would get multiple pieces. Yeah, Kenpo, American Kenpo karate, like Gunn is saying, might be referred to as talking karate, because that's the way that Ed taught it. Now, real Kenpo karate is from Asia, and it's not what Ed taught. Ed took the forms of Kenpo that were taught in Asia, and he modified them heavily, and he mixed them with movements from several different disciplines. And he called it American Kenpo, like you could see on the magazine cover. Other people within the karate field, there were basically two schools of thought at that point. There was the school that supported Ed and they loved Ed. And there was the school that really disliked Ed. And they said that he was ruining karate. And much like when Elvis came up through into popularity using rock and roll, which was a brand new form of music, people didn't like it. And when Ed starts using this new form of karate, people don't like it. And they say that it ruined this or that about the art. It's not true karate, that he didn't even maintain the same forms all the time, because he was all about flexibility and real world situation. And so there's entire magazines and websites devoted to how terrible Ed Parker is for karate. And then they also linked that to he was a terrible person and that he cheated people in business. Well, I think we've already heard enough evidence that we can tell that Ed didn't cheat people in business. Now, Ed made some poor business decisions. And at one point, he makes a poor business decision that affects Elvis directly. Elvis becomes very upset about it, and he and Ed break for a period. So Ed's not perfect. And Ed does have very unique and individual thoughts all his own, and he walks his own path. And so he does teach the talking karate, the Kenpo karate, American Kenpo karate. And Gunn asks which of the two of the 8th grade black belts was he most proud of? I think he's proud of all of them, right? I don't know that he's most proud of one or another. I think Elvis loves Ed, and I think he loves Conry, and that he seeks the approval of both of these gentlemen, and that he's tickled to death when he gets it. So I don't know that he'd be prouder of one than the other, but that's an interesting question. Very interesting. But to get back to what Ed was saying about the UFOs, he and Elvis start to discuss UFOs, and they both have something that they're afraid to tell the other, but they both now trust each other enough that they're able to share. And Ed shares that he's seen an unidentified flying object, and Elvis tells him he has as well. They have both had this experience. And I don't know what these guys saw. Ed does not describe either of the experiences. But they saw something that they felt was strange and unnatural. An unidentified flying object, perhaps aliens from another world. Although Ed puts it as probable occupants. So I think they also discussed the chance that it was all military. This was some kind of military maneuvers in a new kind of vehicle. But Elvis has had a UFO experience. I think that's fascinating. Gunn asked another friend who disappointed Elvis, Ed. Yes. It turns out that nearly every good friend Elvis ever had disappoints him in some way. Now, we have to ask in each instance, did this friend truly disappoint Elvis, or did Elvis perceive that he was disappointed by them? And in many cases, we don't know what actually happened. But like, all of them do it. All of them. Perhaps not Charlie Hodge, but Charlie, I believe, always disappointed Elvis with his alcohol consumption. That Charlie would become openly inebriated. And Charlie would go his own way from time to time, but I don't think Elvis minded that too much. Like, everybody needs a break from everybody once in a while. The other guys would break too. I think some of them, it really did bother Elvis, like Jerry Schilling. I think it really bothered Elvis that Jerry left. Dr. Nick and Joe disappoints more than once, Joe Esposito. And Dr. Nick and Joe get into this thing where they try to start these racquetball courts, which is a business. They involve Elvis, so now money's involved. That becomes a disappointment. Elvis gets involved in that karate movie. He puts Jerry Schilling in charge of it. Turns into a disappointment. Ed, what happens with Ed is he gives a karate demonstration, one of these karate convention things that he does, where he crowns champions and stuff, but it brings a big crowd, and it brings a lot of attention to karate, and a lot of people will start lessons at these various karate locations because Ed holds these kind of events. And Elvis got really excited to go to one. I don't have any of the details in front of me, just talking this out of my memory. But Elvis gets to the event, and there are signs that say Elvis Presley will be here. Elvis assumes Ed's done this. Ed says that somebody else did it, somebody connected with the event. They printed these signs and put them up, and he wasn't aware that they were up. But these were big signs, right? So it's possible Ed wasn't aware. But they're up, and Elvis sees them, and he sees that his name is being used to draw a crowd for something that he did not give permission for his name to be used for. And a member of his inner circle appears to have sanctioned this, which is Ed. Elvis comes to an immediate conclusion. And it's probably close enough to right that we can give Elvis the leeway on that one. His name is up on this big sign. And Elvis turns around and leaves. And then there is a split between him and Ed for a while. We haven't got to that. We're not going to get to it in this episode. And we're not going to get to it in the next episode. I think that these two spent a lot of quality time together. And that, like all of Elvis's friends, there comes a point where they disappoint him. But we can't dwell on these disappointments if we want to know Elvis. We have to live in the moments when Elvis is happy with these people, when they are truly friends together, despite what they grow into or what they do later. And then we got to look at that part too, because of course it breaks Elvis's heart and it changes who he is. But Ed, I think we can see from other people, was a good person. Like Dr. Nick, he's a good person, but he makes some bad decisions. And I think every single person has made bad decisions. And it's not always the friend's fault when they leave Elvis, because he too is a difficult person. Gunn says that George Klein did not disappoint Elvis. That's very interesting. I would say that George Klein did not disappoint Elvis. He was a very special case. And I cannot think of another member of the inner circle who was... Well, no, I'll just leave it to what Gunn says, that George did not disappoint. I will make him the exception. There could be others. If you guys can name them, I'll be happy to put them on the exception list as well. But I know that there were times that Marty Lacker disappointed Elvis. We know Red, we know Sonny, we know Dave. We know Joe, we know Jerry. There could still be others, though. And of course, he had friends that were not within the inner circle, and a lot of them never disappointed. But I think if you spend a massive amount of time with people, they can't always live up to who you want them to be. I think that's part of it. The other part of it is that some of them just weren't as good at people as maybe they should have been. But that's why we're here, to go through this and try to get it as close as we can to the real events and the truth, so that we can make our own decisions and form our own opinions and be ready to accept new information to fit into the history. Because what we can't do, what I've seen other people do on other channels, is they ignore certain pieces of the history in order to facilitate their points. Ed Gunn says Charlie Hodge. I would put him real close to never having truly disappointed Elvis. But I think Elvis got really irritated with Charlie at times because of the drinking. George, I don't believe there were any moments that I can think of in any of the stories. Doesn't mean there weren't any. But that Elvis was angry with George himself. But there were moments where he was angry with all of the others. And I think a lot of that comes from when you're together with people 24 hours a day and nobody's getting enough sleep. And possibly you're all doing substances that are legal, but maybe you're overdoing it. You know, things are not going to go as well all the time as you may wish them to go. But Charlie Hodge, I'd put him high up on that list of good Elvis friends. And that really runs me to everything, the end of the hour. And when we come back in the next episode, we will look at this beautiful ring that Elvis gifted to Ed Parker. And we're going to talk about a lot more that Ed and Elvis talked about. And Linda says that she would say George and Charlie didn't betray Elvis. Now that's different. People who betrayed Elvis as opposed to people who did not betray Elvis. Well, now we get a much larger list of good friends. And I would definitely agree. Neither George nor Charlie ever betrayed Elvis in any way. I would say Jerry Schilling never betrayed Elvis. I think he disappointed him, but I don't think he betrayed him. And we could go through a whole list of people, and it might be fun to do in one episode. But for now, I've got to let you go. And I'm going to play a song on our way out. And we'll do circle or cross on the circle to remind us about what Elvis was looking for in the relationships with the people that he loved. You all keep on taking care of business.
He saw the cross at dawn and said, "It's a good omen, never dream again." At the break of dawn, through the window pane, he saw a cross in morning rain, white as grace, tall as prayer, calling him to build and share. Not a kingdom, not a throne, but a place of love alone, where laughter rides on horse's breath and peace outshines the fear of death. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home where the cross stands tall. Come and share the love of all. Mobile homes and barbecue nights, trucks and trials and porch light rides. He handpicked hard to share the dream, a mythic village by the stream. This is more than land, it's grace, refuge carved in sacred space, a gift of love to friends and kin, protected from the world's loud din. Come home to the circle